Welcome to Outdoorsy, the podcast where we are redefining what it means to be outdoorsy and reclaiming the word itself. I'm your host, Madeleine. I am beyond excited to introduce to you a guest who is a trailblazer in the world of all things camping, Rolland, also known to his massive online community as Campthropology. With a dedicated following on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and the host of his very own podcast, Rolland has made it his mission to get people outside, not just for adventure, but for mental health and well-being and all the things as well. Known in my book as the king of cozy camping, Rolland's Rolland's expertise and best gear recommendations are like showing the most comfortable setups, and he even created an outdoor movie night under the stars, like just so cool. I actually think I first found Rolland through a viral video about pooping outdoors.
Yeah.
So if you're watching the video episode, I'll put a little screen grab of one of those fantastic blurred out videos. But obviously, as you can tell, he is all about making camping approachable, accessible, and most importantly, just enjoyable. So Rolland, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you on.
Wow, thank you for having me. That was quite the intro, and the massive following part. I was like, I don't think it's massive, but it's good.
Just a little hair
Thank
flip.
you. Yeah, a little
Yeah.
hair flip, a little brush your shoulders off. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm super honored to be in the first group that you're launching. I'm so excited to see how it's going to grow. I'm sure it's going to be great. It looks great so far. Sounds great so far, and I think the hype is there and lived up to. So I'm super stoked. I was trying to guess the creators. You launched a little teaser and like blurred out. I was like, I think I know a couple of them on there. That was awesome. I like that.
Good. Yeah, I'm so excited. It's a really good group of people. And yeah, I think that you're going to add a really awesome, just valuable, interesting perspective. So I can't wait to dig into it. So thank you for all those kind words. And I'm excited too. I'm thrilled to have you on.
Yeah, thank you. The honor is mine. Definitely.
This is gonna be the whole episode, is we're just gonna be complimenting each other back and forth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody's okay with that.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your relationship to the outdoorsy community as a whole, like your relationship to the outdoors. Did you grow up loving the outdoors? Talk to me a little bit about how you got started here.
Yeah, so I'm like going back, like I feel like just a lot of kids. I was born in '87, so I'm like what is that, like a older, I don't know, millennial of some sort. But I remember outside was like going outside skateboarding. Before we were looking at the stars, we were looking at the street lights. So when to come home, like we were just out causing ruckus. I remember I was outside a lot of times with no shoes, and all my cousins, friends would make fun of me. I hated wearing shoes as a kid. So I used to run in the grass and everything. I feel like I must have had, now it's like, I take my shoes off, and if I don't have my like nice comfy Hokas on or something, I'm like, oh my God. But just spending so much time outside, was my first like introduced. I consider that outdoorsy. As kids, it's natural for us to want to go out and explore outdoors. That's where you meet your first friends sometimes. That's where you get hurt. That's where you learn. That's where you experiment. That the world is kind of your laboratory when you're outside as a kid, especially when, like, I grew up in like a neighborhood where we had a little group that we ran around with. And, I feel like back then you couldn't go down the street or even to the next neighborhood, and there was no phones then. Your parents weren't tracking you. So that was kind of like my first introduction. But yeah, I grew up camping. I wouldn't say a lot like I do now, but kind of like I don't know what average would be, a couple times a year with my mom and dad. My mom also practices like a nature-based religion, so that was also very prevalent in the house, and like lessons about life and stuff. But yeah, we camped like at San Onofre, up here like in San Diego. We went to like San Felipe and down in Mexico. We did like Julian around here, like the local stuff. Even now I know all of our local little camp spots. A lot of people are super surprised. They're like, you've probably been to all the national parks. I'm like, I've been like a handful. Like I like to get to know my campsites or like my local national forests, and like know like the animals, and like like literally there's like a campground where I go where I have a skunk friend that I see every time. So but yeah, growing up like that, skateboarding and then camping here and there. I played like hockey, roller hockey, as well as ice hockey. So I was outside when I was doing roller hockey and stuff like that. But that's kind of where it started, and then probably got like seriously, honestly, I say I started watching Walking Dead in like 2016, and then for some reason that got me. There's like into like survival. Like there's this weird, I don't know if you've been to it, this weird overlay of like outdoor and like preppers. And that's how I kind of came in. And I also like gear a lot too. So I was like, oh wow, a lot of the outdoor kind of community, prepper community also is like very gear heavy, like stats about a flashlight or a knife or a tent. And my mind's always been in that space a lot too. So I feel like there was just all these little checkpoints that like clicked, that piqued my interest to the point where it was like a culmination of a lot of things that I love is what the outdoors it has been and still continues to be for me, basically.
Yeah, I loved what you're saying about your childhood experiences with the outdoors because I think that a lot of people, at least that are in like my online community who follow me and stuff, are into adulthood and they're terrified to get started because they're like, well, I've never been outdoorsy in the past. I didn't grow up outdoorsy. But like the stuff you were explaining, everybody did that as a kid.
Oh
Everybody's
yeah,
running
yeah.
around being grubby and like just being messy outside. Like
Yeah,
that's just,
totally. Like
and that's outdoorsy.
it's like a re-education or like a reintroduction to the outdoors. Even
Yeah.
if you didn't have like huge swaths of land that were like what you would call like, grass or something like that. Because I know like a lot of, people live in areas like, where they like where there's no the biggest plot of grass is probably like, your front yard. But urban outdoors, whatever you call it, that I feel like that's still outdoors, that's still a thing. And you like, like I said, we were playing hockey on the street a lot of times. We weren't like in the forest, especially being in California, like we don't have a lot of backwoods areas, so we were just romping around neighborhoods, So, but I feel like too, like I was saying, I always really remembered you connect with like the heat of summer, the rain. It was raining, everybody would go make little paper boats, sail them down the street. You start to connect with nature and the natural world and your environment back then. So I feel like a lot of people, like you were saying, just need to like re-remember that, at any capacity that they are when they're older. And it can be like, meeting a long lost friend sometimes, going out there and like rediscovering that natural wild aspect. I feel like that's in everybody, like but it can be intimidating for sure.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone else on a podcast episode about how when we go out in nature and we see something really cool, it like reinvigorates that really childlike wonder, and all of a sudden you're transported back to just being this kind of little kid that's in awe of what you're seeing. And I think that's just such a cool universal experience that we can all have when we are reconnecting with nature. Like it could just be as simple as looking up at the night sky and being like, "Oh, I didn't realize there were that many stars." In
Oh
this
yeah.
area. This is so cool. Or,
Yeah.
seeing your skunk friend out and about and being like, oh my God,
Yeah. What's up,
whatever it
homie?
might
Yeah.
be. Yeah. It just brings you back to that childhood place. And
Yeah, totally.
it's nice. Yeah.
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 Especially the
Um,
stars.
yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. You've gone to some really cool places where you've been able to see like lovely stars and stuff too. I want all of the people listening to this podcast to go follow you on all the channels and stuff because you share so much interesting, fun, cool stuff, whether it be about gear or camping setups or like, driving your car over crazy terrain and things
Yeah.
like that. I want you to kind of tell everybody so that they can kind of feel like they know you a little bit more, how you got started with Campthropology. You can maybe even talk about how that name came to be, and what inspired you to really like share your love for camping and the outdoors with everybody
Yeah,
online.
totally. I'll start with the Campthropology thing because I feel like I came up with a name, and that's what like really invigorated me. Like, ooh, maybe I can do something like with like content, I guess you could say. So I've probably been once 2020 hit, I bought my Outback, and then I went back to college later. I graduated in 2019 from UCSD. I'm an anthropology major. So the name Campthropology I kind of piggybacked off. There's this like everyday carry brand called Carryology, and I always thought that was cool. So I was like, let me just make up a name that's like extremely long and probably super hard to remember, not very good from a branding standpoint. Um, but I came up with the name. I was like, that's really cool, and I kind of just shelved it away. I ended up buying my Outback in 2020. I was fortunate enough to be able to have a vehicle to like go out when kind of everything was shutting down. And almost since 2020, I've been camping, I would say at least 2 to 3 times a month. So quite a bit. And like I said, it's all it's not always big trips. A lot of it's just local 1 or 2 nighters here and there. But I always watched like I initially was drawn to like the overlanding content, the overland creators with their $100,000 billion rigs and like all their modifications, and it's lifted and it goes like monster truck and all that. I loved that. I was like, this is super cool. But when it came down to doing my build, I was like, oh wow, that's a lot of that's not really feasible, and it's like extremely expensive. And also, like, even if you do, that's not like a hobby where once you buy something you're good. Like a lot of times overlanders are like pushing their rigs. I feel like that's part of their culture too, and like so breaking stuff. And it's like, oh great, now I have to figure out something to do with that. But I was like, that I like how they're sharing information about it because I enjoy the process of like learning. So me and the fiance were on a trip. I think in 2022 is when I started, and then I studied TikTok a little bit, like because I think I downloaded TikTok on 2022 in like April, and just seeing some of the outdoor content. And so I always try to like mirror things before I actually try them. Like it's way easier to try like, okay, this is what kind of the camera angles. 'Cause I have zero training in like film or anything like that. So I did a video that gained quite a bit of traction. And the first, I feel like, not even like with the intention of going viral, just like, hey, let's just see how this does out there in the world. And then I like have a very vivid reaction of what it's like to go viral. It's like, it's so weird. It's especially when it's something like for the outdoors, because like you understanding like how the information just like wildfire, like no pun intended, like how the information just like going, and you get all kinds of people out there. But in the first video, I think it was about yellow post campsites and dispersed camping. And I don't remember, it probably got like 500,000 views, but I started to see in that, I saw two things that I wasn't expecting. One, a lot of people were asking questions that were like very basic, like, oh wow, like what do you do with your, one of the videos is what do you do with your poop at dispersed campsites. So that's where that video kind of stemmed from. But a lot of people were like, where do you go, where can I book a campsite, where can I find a campsite? And this video wasn't even about booking a campsite, it was just like a dispersed campsite, but people had very simple questions, and I was like, wow, the need is there. For some reason I assumed like, oh, doing it for so long, I assumed, oh, everybody, the privilege of being able to do it for so long. I forgot that everybody starts somewhere. So that's when I was like, maybe I'll start doing this like super simple, how to set up a tent, like what tent stakes do, those kind of videos and content. And then also, the second thing I saw that kind of blew my mind was, I always knew, like, so when I was at UCSD, I'm an anthropology major. Being in medical school, we took a lot of courses about culture and what happens when you export culture into other cultures. And so within that, I took like, I should have got a minor in like critical gender or critical race theory, because like those are my favorite classes. I took like almost all of them. So I was familiar with the concepts of like gatekeeping and the concepts of basically not people having access and marginalized communities not having access to certain things. I wasn't expecting that in the outdoors. I don't know why. And that's another thing that I saw. I had people that were saying, thank you for sharing, like information like this needs to be out there. And people also saying, you should not be sharing this information, should not be out there. And the post that I put, like, it didn't drop a location. It was more about education. And from that point on, I was like, wow, there's a huge divide, one, first and foremost, but also there's a huge gap in knowledge. So there's like not a lot of creators that I see, at least. Everybody does gear, and I love gear. But like, I just dropped like a how to pack your trash out video like this week, because I feel like for people that camp all the time, it seems simple until nobody remembers, like, okay, I got my trash in the bag, and like now it's time to leave and the trip's over. Like, what do I do with this thing? Like, do I tie it to my car? Do I put it in my car? Is it going to leak in my car? So I was like, I want to do content that's educational, so that it's not like the gatekeeping or like the geotagging. It's like if everybody focused on education, I think it would go a lot further. Both sides, because the thing is, we all love nature, so we all protecting the same thing and wanting people to experience the same thing. But I'm just so surprised how little I see of like that kind of content. Or for example, it's like, rightfully so, I see a lot of creators making videos about when they're hiking out there and they see like a fire still smoldering, right? In my mind, it's like that video should be followed up with how to put out a fire. every time you see it right away. Proper ways to put out a fire, a link to where you can go to find the information, or like in California, like you need, if you're dispersed camping anywhere outside of a private campground, you need a burn permit. It's free and it's just like a couple questions online, but like you can get fined if you're out there dispersed camping and a ranger rolls up and I've had it happen one time. They've asked for permits, especially during times like now where it's so dry and fires are so prevalent. But my goal, all that to say that my goal was like, I want to do education, I want to make it fun, I want to make it entertaining, I want it to be goofy, so that it is approachable. Like I try to make the content that I would want to see. Like I always liked in school, like all the teachers or professors that were like also goofy, but like also like knew their shit. Oh, sorry, can you cuss on this one?
Oh yeah.
that also knew their stuff. Those are the most entertaining and the most memorable to me. And also, when I graduated, another side tangent in that professor, I was the first generation in my family to go to college, so I was a McNair scholar. So I got this I was in the program, this research program to basically do grad research at an undergrad level, and they gave me like a research stipend, and I was like, I want to do it on I want to buy new hiking gear. I'm just going to say it right now. It's like, I have this money for research. So I went to my PI and I was like, hey, what can I buy with this research stipend? Like anything that helps you with the research. I was like, cool. I want to research some fancy name, like the transformative aspects of long distance through hiking and like how that changes like the person of an individual and like their perception and positionality in the world. Something like that, But I did the first 100 miles of the PCT and I interviewed people. I trail angeled. That's like close to when Wild came out. So there was like a huge influx of people like attempting. So that was really cool to see. But in that sense too, like all my professors and mentor professors and my PI, I was on this track to go to grad school. And then kind of 2020 happened and I was like, I'm good. I have a full-time job. I'm good. So this is my like redemption of that, to like still be educating, obviously not in like the collegiate level, but like I feel like this is like more important and to make it even more accessible as well. And it's really cool. I've had some people that are in their doctoral programs, interview me about kind of like coming from academia and coming into like the outdoor space as well, to share that information. And like I'm just like, whoa, full circle, completely full circle. But trying to just like still be in like the educational field without like actually having a boss or an institution backing me, like a cowboy educationalist just like out there doing it.
Perfect. That's like the next branding thing for you, is
Yeah.
cowboy educationalist.
Yeah.
There's so much that you just talked about that I feel like we could have like multiple follow-up episodes about.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I mean, there's so much crossover, right, between like what you're talking about and like what I've experienced too with the online community I've built with. I've been really surprised by a couple of things. One is what content has kind of gone viral or gotten a lot of traction. And like you, my educational content around really simple concepts, things that I took for granted that I didn't really realize weren't, common knowledge, where I'm educating in like a very approachable way. Those took off. I mean, I did one recently that was just like, what do you do when you pull up to a campsite? Like, because I remember when I first went out for the very first time as an adult, like no parent, no partner, no anybody else, figuring all this stuff out. And I was like, shoot, I've never really paid attention
Yeah,
to
right.
what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like, what am I supposed to do?
Seems
Do
so
I talk
simple
to
until
someone?
it comes up and you're like, now what?
Yeah. And then you're out there and you don't have self-service. You can't like Google it,
Mhm.
So having this education that's readily available that you're like consuming on a more regular basis by following people like you, I mean, it's so valuable for people just starting out. And I do think that one of the things that I've struggled with that I've really admired in your content is sometimes I feel almost jaded and almost like angry when I see people doing stuff that violates leave no trace, or people who are like clearly being negligent and then posting content that's like showing damage to whatever, or showing them doing something dangerous or whatever it might be, setting a bad example, right?
Totally.
We've all
Yeah.
seen it. And for me, instead of saying like, oh, wow, this is a really great learning opportunity, not just for that person, but also for everybody else who's seeing this content, I should make a follow-up video, like sharing the proper way to put out a fire or whatever it might be. I like get snarky and I'm like, they should already know that, I'm like,
Yeah. I think you
and
have a
so,
whole playlist, right, of, like, on your TikTok of, like, people violating. You're like, "I'm
yeah,
coming
yeah,
for you
I do.
if I see you
I
outside."
have it, I have it saved because I'm like, and it's like private because I'm like, I don't want to actually shame these people, but I have a shit list. I do.
Yeah, yes, I
And
remember seeing your posts on that, yeah.
yeah, but like, there's a fine line, right, between like
Yeah,
people who
for
are
sure.
just being like intentionally negligent and not caring. And the other thing I was going to say that I've been surprised about is how many people just genuinely don't know and are actually wanting to learn. So it's
Yeah,
not people who
really,
are like
yeah, that's very true.
willfully ignorant. They just are like, oh, I didn't know that. Like
And
I was talking about, yeah,
that's always my
go ahead.
assumption is that unless you can, like, I don't think I've seen a video where someone has, like, a smirk on their face, they're obviously doing something wrong.
Right.
So, my assumption, and, call it being an optimist, but, like, my assumption is that even if it's, like, kind of intentional, like, "Oh, whatever," like, if you educate in a way that it spreads, that they eventually might be like, "Oh, wow, like, I don't wanna be doing that anymore," like, so same thing too, like, and it's all the simple stuff, and I think that, I don't know if it's your experience as well, but for me, I learned so much from my community as well, from people that are asking me about beginner stuff, because what it does for me is it slows down my process. And when I'm making the video, like in the process of creating that content, I'm like, okay, why am I doing it like this? Like, why do I set up my footprint first, where some people will do the tent first? So, like, it makes me really walk through my process, intentionality of why I do things. And that brings up, like, oh, I do it like this because one time this happened and it didn't work, or because I have a different piece of gear that makes this act different than it's when it's used alone or used with another ancillary piece of gear. So I really love how beginner questions help me learn about my setup, which makes it even more personal and more enjoyable for me as a camper. Like, I feel, and then a lot of people always struggle with feeling confident outdoors. That kind of stuff, because I'm pretty confident when it comes to camping, especially in my areas. But when I learn the ins and outs of a process that I'm doing because somebody asked me, that makes me more confident even in myself. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, you don't have to worry. So, for example, I always say, the wind, setting up stakes certain ways for the wind. It's such a terrifying experience if to be in wind and being not sure if your tent is going to hold up correctly. And then one time I made a video about tent stakes, and then I realized, oh, this is the mechanics of what it's doing and why I'm doing it this way. So the next time I was in wind in that tent, I felt just like, oh yeah, it's gonna hold. Like, it'll be fine. Like, knock on wood. Maybe I was, nature always has a way of being like, huh, you think so? But the process of teaching while simultaneously learning, I think, does wonders for myself as a camper, and I think the community as a whole, as well as individual campers too. I mean, one of the things that I like to point out as far as like inclusivity is very, very, very rarely. I have met a couple people that someone will be interested in the outdoors and completely take that on as a solo endeavor and adventure for themselves. It's a little easier nowadays because of all the content and all the information that we have online. But I feel like historically, especially for people that usually aren't outdoorsy, it takes someone to show you, to show you the ropes, not just to like you said, I never paid attention before. Now that I'm here by myself, it's like, what do I do? So it's a lot easier nowadays, but I think that building the confidence is like, once you're confident enough to go with somebody, like, take someone new, and then that's how the community kind of builds. It's like the one person gets this person into it, and then person number 2 gets person number 3 into it, and number 4 into it, and then they go off into their groups and separate, families, and start doing that, because everybody loves a beautiful sunset photo, and everybody's like, oh, I want to go there, like, regardless of not seeing all the work that goes into getting there. So I think that it's really cool to teach and to learn simultaneously, even as a new camper. Like, even as a brand new camper, you go out and you set up your tent for the first time, like, you're excited. That's a very cool thing that you're doing. You can show your little brother, sister, nephew, older friend, grandparent, and then they can get stoked on it too. And I think that way of like opening up, I always say, like, I'm a locksmith. People can gatekeep all they want, but I was like, I'm a locksmith. I'm not breaking the locks, but I'm showing people how to make keys. That's for damn sure. Like, so you'll, in the process of making the keys, the process of learning about the outdoors, which I hope in that process of education you learn to respect it. Because I get it, it's one thing to just open the floodgates and all of a sudden people are just there. But if you can figure out a way to educate people on their way to going to those geotagged locations, like I said, call me an optimist, but I think that's the best approach. That's how I can sleep well at night, not completely gatekeeping, not dropping pins, but showing people, I'll show you how to do everything in between both of those things, but it's your responsibility to go out there and have fun, keep it safe, clean, and keep yourself informed. That's kind of my tagline on every video. Those are the 3 pillars of what I make content on. And I try to keep it accessible.
You also teach in a way that makes other people listen too, which I think is a really valuable skill to have. I was talking to another person on the podcast that has experience being a park ranger, and she's talking about how different people will respond to different approaches of teaching, and a lot of the time, you need to be teaching in a way that is encouraging other people to follow you, and then actually like follow what they were learning from you and pass that along. So whether that's to the next person they bring with them on a hike or whatever it might be, empowering them to feel like they understand the why behind some of this stuff too, like what you're saying
Totally.
about the tent stakes. I think is so interesting because like you could just share, this is how I set up my tent stakes, but you actually go a step further and say, this is why I do that, and I didn't even realize, but like this is how I figured this out, and this is the why behind this particular thing. And the same goes for like rules and regulations too, is a lot of people just don't know. Like I had
Yeah,
so many
totally.
people not understand why you can't throw a banana peel on the ground. People just
Hmm.
didn't know. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, I never thought of it that way. And I was like, yeah, now you know. Now you can tell other people,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that really helps. Yeah.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
why is what makes it stick. When you said that, it's totally true. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So you've touched on it a little bit, but I do want to get into well, talking a little bit more about inclusivity and that kind of thing. But before we do that, you've touched on this too, of how you define outdoorsy and how maybe you've identified with this at various points or not throughout your journey as an outdoorsy person. So I just love to hear from you. How do you define outdoorsy?
Yeah. I feel like if you enjoy being outside, I feel like that's outdoorsy. It can be on your stoop. It can be in your backyard. Honestly, it doesn't even have to. So I don't. I was trying to find this because I saw that question. I thought it was a really good question. And I think I got this from another creator, but and this goes into what I consider outdoorsy. I think what we're doing, both of us right now, even being inside talking about something we love about being outside, is outdoorsy. I don't think you necessarily have to be physically outside to be outdoorsy. And the creator that I'm talking about, I wish I could remember who they were. It was probably on some podcast somewhere, but they basically said you experience like a camping trip 3 times. You experience it when you're researching it and getting exciting and planning it. You experience it when you're actually experiencing it, and then you experience the memory of it after. And so each
Mm.
stage of that journey for me is outdoorsy. If it puts you in a good headspace, imagining being outside, I feel like that's outdoorsy. Like when I'm researching gear at home, that's outdoorsy to me. I'm looking at my next tent or sleeping bag, or somebody asked me a question and I'm, you know, in the matrix of my phone, I'm thinking about outdoorsy. It's bringing me joy. I'm imagining, what it's like out there. I'm imagining, oh, how would this do in the rain? How would this tent do if there was wind? How would this tent do beating down in the sun? And I enjoy all that. That's outdoorsy to me. If you hate being outside, maybe that's where the definition is drawn. Like maybe you're not outdoorsy. That's fine. That's totally fine. But if it brings you joy, even thinking about being outside, in my mind, like that's outdoorsy. Period.
I love that. That's such a unique perspective. I've never thought of it that way before, but I completely agree with you. Even when I've been reading books about outdoorsy adventures,
Totally.
I'm like picturing myself in these situations and coming up with the idea in my head and thinking about like, living a little movie in my brain. And that to me feels outdoorsy and cozy. And I think all that research you're talking about too, like you're still involved in the outdoors, even if you necessarily can't get out all the time. And this kind of goes into the next question I had for you, is about inclusivity. I think I've posted a lot about what outdoorsy is online, and a lot of the comments I get from people is like, well, that's not outdoorsy. You're not
Oh yeah.
outdoorsy if you're not out there all the time and you're not
Oh
hiking or whatever. There's a lot of people who kind of have this weird elitism, gatekeeping, you've mentioned this a couple times already, feeling about who fits into the outdoorsy community. So like, what can we do to overcome that? How can we help people feel encouraged that that's not the majority of people that feel that way or think that way, that the majority of people are like, yeah, you're outdoorsy. Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that just like if that is our truth, that what we're talking about, like living that like most authentically and not being afraid of that, like not being afraid when we get into like things. I don't know, I'm an only child, so I like to get into it with people online sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. Like
You and I
I'll go head
both.
I'll go head to head with people. I loved when you can freaking pin someone's comment at the top on TikTok. I was so bummed when they took that away. My fiance's like, oh, you like put people's head on a spike. I'm like, yeah. So living a truth like that, and if people want to be a-holes about it, like I could be an a-hole back, but in a good way, like come at me, like let's go toe to toe. And I feel like when people talk about creating safe spaces, like even if people seeing other people live their truth and defending their truth in the name of like including everybody makes people feel safe, and like part of it, like being public personalities, like I mean, you don't have to do this. Like I've been a part of and started a lot of communities in non-social media worlds before, and I always say that in the most effective communities, I use this spear metaphor, like a throwing spear. I don't know why it just makes sense to me. It's not like it's a weapon or it's violent, but it's like the point of a spear is the sharpest point, right? There's a handful of people that are the movers, shakers, the bleeding edge, no pun intended, of getting stuff done. They'll pave the way. Right behind the point, there's like the blades of the spear, right? Those are people that are a little bit more pragmatic. They have a little bit more of a plan. They can open the space once it's punctured for people to come through. But a spear is only as good as the people behind it that aren't part of what you would think is sharp or dangerous, right? It's the wooden handle. It's the momentum of people, because without the momentum of a community, you can be an activist all you want, but if you're just by yourself, it's going to be hard to get anything done. You have to have these kind of aspects to be there. So as creators, us, or me personally, like I don't want to speak on behalf of you, but I see that responsibility to be someone that can be out there and take some shit from people and give some shit back. Not everybody has to be like that. Like, no, not everybody should be like that, because then it's just like chaotic. But I feel like a lot of times people seeing that and holding space for yourself and people out there too, in a way that's responsible, a way that's respectful. Like I said, if people want to give me shit, I'll give you shit back. I'll never low blow you, but I'll just put it out there, like you'll see, and like understanding that. I think that's my personal the biggest way to allow for people to feel safe in the communities. Like I wouldn't say my communities, but the community, because the community will ebb and flow with different people, different personalities, and everybody's equally important in bringing something to the table, and even people that don't say anything. That's the momentum. That's the real community. The majority of people just want to be there, fly on the wall, and that's the momentum. That's the mass that makes things move, that makes movements go here and there. The silent contributors, if you will. So I think for sure in that sense, being that online, that's something that I have learned is there's a lot of people on the sidelines that, because for example, I used to have an open mic night, right? So we would have like sometimes it'd be a couple hundred people there, and you can physically see everybody, and like there'd be 10 artists, right? One host, 10 artists, and a DJ out of the 200 people. But what made that such a cool space was the 185 people that didn't do anything, That's what it was. So seeing that online is almost like exponentially, especially once you grow a little bit of a following. You have a lot of silent supporters out there that want to see you do good, that they might like, so we would have people sorry about the open mic metaphor again. We'd have people that come to the open mic for a straight year, not say anything, just watch the entire year. All of a sudden, one time they get up, they do a poem, fucking people are blown away. And I never pushed anybody. I'm like, damn, I've seen you here for like a year. I was like, what made you decide? And that's the thing. They're like, just seeing everybody be supportive. Everybody will come out of their shell, if they even do at a certain time. So being in the digital space, it's like there's a lot of people with eyes on us, and they're seeing how we interact. I can't believe how much comment sections go off. Like when I realized that, I'm like, whoa, people like are not even like. I'm like, where are these people coming from? Like some defend you, some also talk shit, which is fine. It's like it's a public platform. But I'm like, dude, there are people that just surf comment sections. Like even people just boom, little like there. I'm like, how does this comment have more likes than the video itself? It's just like, what is going on? You know? But yeah, long-winded answer to say how to be more inclusive. For me personally, it's like that. And I think that if you just follow who you are and what feels right and do that, quietly or loudly, other people will also find comfort in that. Because it's the quiet people that are sitting next to each other that never say anything. They're like, hey, this is pretty cool, huh? And then like, yeah, tell your other friends. And all of a sudden, that 180 people is like 400 people next time. Same amount, one host, one DJ, 10 artists, 200 people in the crowd, 500, whatever. But it's all those people that are like, hey, this is super cool. That make the community, Without them, we're nothing, really. Like, there is no community without the people.
Yeah, I love those analogies that you used. It's such a good visual. And I actually think I'm going to take it one step further and talk about how, like, I this analogy of how there's all these kind of silent supporters and stuff actually kind of reminds me of how I've had a lot of people ask me, like, in my DMs or my comments and stuff, how I deal with, like, shitty people in the comments or the really loud people online who, I've had people come into my comment section and truly make violent threats to me because I'm just sharing educational information for people and trying to make the outdoors more accessible because they don't want that. They want to continue to gatekeep and keep it this like elite area. But my feedback to people who are nervous about experiencing people like that out in the wild is that that's few and far between. Like those might be the couple of like haters that showed up early to the open mic show
Yeah,
and are
yeah.
sitting in the front, but the
The
majority of
hecklers.
the people, yeah, the hecklers at the show, the majority of the people there are there to enjoy what is going on and are going to be the ones that are like, oh yeah, and tell each other about it. Like I think a lot of people be very surprised to know that despite what you might see online or like what you might hear from the loudest, most negative voices out there, the vast majority of people in the outdoorsy community and the outdoorsy space are welcoming, do want to help you, do want to answer questions, and like do want to continue making this a more approachable, inclusive space. It sometimes just gets lost because some of those loud voices just like drown it out and make it seem like it doesn't exist. But you have to remember the silent supporters in the crowd.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a very good point. Like the duality of like the outdoor IRL space and people behind the
Mm-hmm.
keyboard. It's like it's completely different. Like I don't
Yeah.
think I've ever run into anybody like that out there. And like I said, I've had all kinds of people walk up to my campsite, and honestly, most people. When I say all kinds of people, I mean all kinds of people. Usually, like I said, the one thing that I feel like unites, and that's something that like very open with my followers. Like it's so crazy, especially like when I have a video kind of going viral. I wouldn't say 50-50, but a very good amount of like thin blue line and also like rainbow flag. It's so crazy. I have both sides of the spectrums. I have a lot of trans followers as well. And I also have a lot of like, I'm sure I have like Trump's followers as well. It's crazy to me to see that, like, what about me just attracting like everybody? I'm like, but the one thing that I really feel is like it's not even me, it's the outdoors space, like the one thing that I feel like everybody could agree on is protecting the outdoors. It's just a matter of how you protect it. Everybody has their version of how it's going to be protected, but I feel like the one thing that I can really sit well is like everybody does care, and even the people that are gatekeeping is because they care. They're just not doing it in a way that is productive, I think. Even like in the other side of the fence too, the people that geotag, I know it's because they care and they want people to experience it, but doing both responsibly. Because there is a safety aspect, especially in the gatekeeping part too. Like you want people to be safe out there, so that's where the education comes in. Especially if you start getting into like quote unquote like overlandy forest road content, like where you're taking your vehicle even on like a soft road or a paved road, like you want to be aware of a lot of different things. You want to be aware and capable and confident in your vehicle. So it's like you don't want to just drop a pin out there and somebody in their grandma's Honda Civic is going to get stuck hours from help with no cell service, didn't bring enough water, no food, and they can't, get out of that situation. So I see both sides of the fence as well. And I do a lot of exercises to be like, okay, well, what would I think if I was on this side? What would I think was on this side? What would be the common solution between both? And for me, it always boils down to education for both of those things. Um, but very rare. I very rarely, honestly, to be quite honest, if you did have a Honda Civic out there and you were stuck on a trail and somebody cruised by with a "Don't Tread on Me" truck, I guarantee you they would honestly probably be like, "Let me help you get out of there." Like, so they love to use all their crap because that's why they buy it. Everybody wants to use their winch. Everybody wants to use their tires and their traction boards and their shovels and stuff. But so yes, I think that in IRL out there, most people, even people, I've had people come to the campsite where I'm almost positive we don't share the same political views, but we'll share a beer and we'll share a hot dog, and it's never been a bad experience, to be honest. We just don't talk politics. We talk, how long have you been out here? Like, how long? Like, oh yeah, like, what do you guys do? What is your gear? What's that flashlight? So I think it is one space in which, out of all the spaces in this crazy world, there is potential for something. That's where my plan ends, but I feel it there. Like I couldn't speak more into like how do we organize people around that, because I'm a big advocate. It's a class war. When we're on the same boat and we're drowning, and everybody at the top is like, just keep them fighting amongst each other. Like, so if we could all get together outside, that would be like ideal.
I everything that you've just said really resonates with me, and as I agree with, and I've also struggled with too, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I
totally.
think that I've had a couple other conversations with people about how the outdoors are the great unifier, like nature is the great unifier between all of us. You can be from different religions and different belief sets, and at the end of the day, we're all looking up at the night sky and being like, oh man, did you see that shooting star? I just saw that shooting
Yeah,
star. And like,
totally.
we all can share this cool experience together. But what it all comes down to is like mutual respect, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
had my car, I wish I could say like I was doing something cool, but I just locked myself out of my car one time in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I had to like radio a tow truck company to come help me in the middle of nowhere. I was by
Uh-huh.
myself,
Wow.
and didn't know where I was at all. And knowing like the general area that I was in, very like kind of rural conservative area, the tow truck guy pulls up, and I didn't even think about it. I'm wearing my shirt that has a little dancing frogs on it, and it says gay rights.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was like, shit. In my
Yeah.
head, I was like, oh no, I put myself in a really bad position to be in. And I was really nervous for like half a second. And then he got out and he kind of looked at me and he was like, those rainbows are very popular nowadays. And then he helped me unlock my car.
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
wasn't like there's, just we do kind of assume the worst sometimes for
Mhm.
good reason, because
Mhm.
history tells us to protect
Totally.
ourselves and to like expect bad, and to be prepared for that. But also like, I hope that people who do have these fairs know that like the majority of interactions are not going to be contentious like that in the
Totally.
great
Totally.
outdoors. For
And
some reason, I don't
I
know.
think too, I'm guilty of it too. Everybody loves freaking park predators and national park after dark, and we all listen to those stories thinking
Right.
that, you know, really in a handful of times those have happened, but like you'll see them, like you just binge all of them at one time, obviously like before you go camping probably, so you're
Yeah,
like
right.
ultra freaked out. And so I think that's also why like the content that we're putting out is also of equal importance to say that it's not always like that. Like it's also fun. But that's also not to disregard people that have had bad experiences. Like I'm pretty
Right.
sure whether however you present, I get scared out there sometimes. Like I'm not afraid to admit it, especially when I'm in an area that I don't know. I'm about to go to a trip to Arizona, and I'm like, all right, that's a whole different place. Like I'm going to be solo on a quick little like camping strike mission out there, and I'm thinking about like going dispersed camping. And I found a dispersed spot, but like because it's kind of like what's it called, like no site. I'm just like showing up and never having physically been there. Boom! I'm all of a sudden I'm in new dispersed camper mindset again. I'm like, well, what do? I need to bring protection? Is there a service there? Like, what's the closest town? Where's the closest hospital? Like, do I need to bring my Zolio, my Garmin? Can I leave stuff outside of my car? Am I having to sleep inside the car? Can I set up a tent there? So I think that it's a it's a healthy thing to be aware, because like anything can happen in nature. Like, it's not just, but it's not only is bad interactions, I feel like, pretty rare, but the more that you can, again, back to educate yourself to be prepared and feel confident, that is one thing that I think, a lesson that people that go from not knowing about camping and outdoors to really loving it, I feel like a lot of times it's the confidence in themselves is what that builds it more than even enjoying the outdoors, because that's the gift that nature gives to us when you are learning and you do know all those things. But like all those concerns that I just listed off, I camp a lot and I can list those concerns off. But when all those concerns are just a big question mark, that's what's scary. Like, and I think I do see a lot of content on that actually, and I really always appreciate it when it's like, here's 5 ways to keep safe when you're dispersed camping. I think that's salient and extremely important. I love seeing that kind of content. But yeah, I think more of that. Like, I'm always I have this big complex of like, oh, I just did a video like that like a month ago, but not everybody sees that post. So like, I'm trying to be like, I could post like the same video or style of video 3 times a month. Like, for some reason I'm like, oh, I already did that like a year ago, I can't do it. But like, my followers are gonna be like, you're posting the same crap. But the algorithms are weird. So I would love to see more content like that, more educational content. Honestly, for creators out there too, I feel like the educational content does better. Or maybe just my funny content just not funny. So that's probably what it could be too. Like, stick to education, funny guy. Just stick to education. That could be too. But
I
I
don't
feel like
think that's true. I really like your videos with all of your little skateboards,
oh yeah.
fingerboards, and I think there was just a video that you put out that was like delivering a little beer in a little toy truck.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
here for
yeah.
that content.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. Outdoor activities too. Like, so when
Yeah.
I don't have any content on it, but I come from backpacking. Like, I was in better hiking condition then. Like, I've done like the Trans Catalina. I spend all kinds of time on the Pacific Crest Trail. Like, I come from a backpacking background, and now doing car camping, like, I do all kinds of weird activities, like, and it's honestly, there's trips where we just hang at the campground. We might go on a little walk around, but like, we're chilling. We're drinking beer. We're cooking food. We're telling stories. We're playing with fingerboards. We're playing with RC trucks. Like, I think that there's nothing wrong with that. And I feel like that also can be intimidating for people too. Is like, well, when I get out there, what do you do? Bring a
Nothing.
book? Bring paint? Yeah, do nothing? Stare at a
Yeah.
tree for an hour? Like, stare at the sky for 2 hours? That's one of the
Yeah.
things about it's like unstructured time. And I feel like that phrase in itself can give people anxiety as well, especially in a world where every minute of our lives is like, has to be some kind of output of production, because being a part of capitalism, we're trained to think that everything has to be productive. Even relaxing, I have to relax, because if I'm relaxed, I can be more productive, blah blah blah, blah, like later. And that's the thing too, like even in camping, you see that it takes a while. Like, I'm an ambassador for Snow Peak, and that's why I absolutely love Snow Peak and the concept of like Shinrin Yoku and slowing their camping culture is completely different out there. It's like, even their gear has made me think about setting up campsites differently. Like, here, like, I have a pop-up tent where you just throw that mofo in the air and it pops up and you're good to go. And I love it. Honestly, I bring that a lot. You'll see that thing a lot in my content. But a Snow Peak trip is different now, because it's a different intention behind the camping experience. Even if it's for 1 or 2 nights, it's like, and if you think about it, how often, I mean, when's anybody gonna build a house with their bare hands for their family or their friends? But you can set up a tent and you can create a little safe space where your family will dream and sleep and have fun and rest and rejuvenate with your bare hands. So enjoy that process of setting up the tent. Enjoy the process of curating uh, uh, a little cozy environment in the cozy environment. It's like cozy environment inception, I feel like there's so much emphasis on like gear has to be and I'm guilty of it too. So when I say this, I'm impersonating myself. Like gear has to be easy and quick so we can fucking get out there and set up and relax. Everybody just race to relax. But it's like, why can't the process itself of setting up camp also be relaxing? And changing that mentality is a wonderful thing, having intentionality. And that's the whole meditative. Everybody's really into being in the now and in the moment. If you can do that, set up a tent to set up the tent, and don't set up the tent because you want to go drink a beer, or do it at the same time, or whatever. Like just be in the moment. Like, I'm going to set up this tent. It might take me 20-30 minutes, but I'm going to enjoy the craftsmanship. I'm going to enjoy the energy I'm putting into it, so that when my friends or just me or my family or whatever goes in there, they're going to be like, wow, it feels really good in this tent. It's not just thrown up in a minute with all this energy of frustration because you want to relax, but so even that too, like that's something that I've been camping so long, I've recently been like really experimenting with, is like liking the whole process of camping, not just the fun parts, like having the duality of like the fun parts and the not fun parts. In the not so fun parts can also be valuable as well, and they can also be fun when you think of it that way, and also be intentional, and there can also be learning experiences in those too, because like I said, when you're just whipping it together, if you do it in a way that's intentional, it's that much easier to teach someone as well when they come over like, hey, can you show me how to set up this tent? And if you've been doing it intentionally the whole time, that's when the teaching moment comes out, and both people can learn from that.
I love that. I never thought about it that way, honestly. I was just, when you were talking about all that, I was reflecting on, I organized a little camping trip for my dad's 60th birthday, and
Cool.
I didn't want anybody to like help with the planning or anything. I just was like, I'm going to get there early. I'm going to set things up. I'm going to plan the food. I'm going to do all the things. And the setup was like, and the planning for it was the most fun because I was setting up for someone else and sharing it with them. And
Mm-hmm.
I think usually in the past, I've been like, oh, God, this be over with? I'm just want to get to sitting around the campfire and relaxing. But this one time when I kind of shifted my mindset, it was much more enjoyable. And
Yeah, totally.
because of the intention behind it. So yeah, I love that. That's such a nice way of thinking of it.
Yeah.
Um, so if we are thinking about getting more people feeling confident about going outdoors, whether that's like camping or just sitting outside or whatever, what is the advice that you would give them?
About getting more people confident and outside.
Yeah,
I
so
th-
like I have a lot of
yeah.
people in my comment section who are always like, I want to do this, but I'm afraid, or I want
Okay.
to do this, but I don't know where to start, or I'm
So where
scared,
the
or
interest is already there, though.
mhm, mhm,
Okay, because
mhm.
that's two different categories for me. Like, I'm always trying
Yeah,
to turn people.
not
Yeah,
forcing people
I'm always trying to
like my
turn people
husband.
that are not. I'm trying to get your. I'm like, have your husband come camping with me. Like, that's like
Yeah,
my goal. It's like get people that don't like camping to like camping. So if the interest is already there,
yeah.
um, for sure. I think I'm a big advocate. Depending on where you're having an experience of like maybe like having doubt, if it's around gear or whatever it is, really sleeping outside, I'm a big advocate. And hopefully this year I'm gonna partner, do a little thing with Slim Pickens Outfitters out in Texas. Go out and spend the night in your backyard or your patio, like even if you're in an apartment, set up your sleeping bag out there, get used to being outside, be like, all right, so once the sun goes down, I'm not gonna go back inside my house until the sun comes up, and see if you can just occupy your time out there like that. Period. You don't have to. You don't, like I said, you don't even have to go on a trip if you're feeling apprehensive, if you're feeling not confident. Gain confidence like that, because you'd be surprised too. Like even if you are feeling confident, you get to the campground, you're like, wow, outside noise or quietness is quiet. That's scary. So even if you live in an urban environment where you're not going to be able to experience complete silence, I guarantee you're going to experience some kind of animal, owl, bird that might be annoying, little rat scurrying around. But those are things that you're tuning your frequency into nature. If you can tune out, the sirens or anything like that, or the honking horns, go out and in your backyard or your patio with the intention of listening to nature, with the intention of absorbing the experience of being outside, feel the ground under you, feel how your gear's going to work, feel if that's the pillow that you want, if that's a sleeping pad, are you going to be cold, are you going to be hot? All these things are going to slowly build your confidence because there are less things you have to worry about when you do decide to take your trip, whether it's with friends or by yourself. The least things that you can worry about, the better of a time you're going to have. And like I said, don't worry about having all the gear. Like, I do have expensive gear. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a gear head. But I always say, like, the cheap gear is if you camp like a normal person, the cheap gear is going to last you a long time. If you're a psycho like me and you're out there every weekend just throwing your crap around, that's one of the reasons why I get the higher end gear, because I'll go on 7 camping trips in 2 months, but like the cheap, like the Ozark Trail, they'll last you a long time. The Coleman stuff, a long time, Um, so get used to your gear, get out there. And like I always say, pack sandwiches, boil eggs at home, peanut butter and jelly, make the sandwiches at home. So you don't have to even bring like a knife out there. Like, literally just take it out of the bag and eat it. Things like that. Like, make the least things you have to worry about so that you can honestly, and let yourself feel a little bit of anxiety. So you can feel anxiety, eventually be like, wow, I really don't, all those things I kind of took care of. I prepped. Like, what other things can I worry about? And that's what every camping trip is, right? It's like, oh, next time I need this, or this sucks, I forgot this. Then you kind of get into that. The fun aspect for me is like alleviating these things. I always say camping is such a weird experience too, because it's like we do all these things to go outside in nature and it's wild, right? But we also bring all these things to control the environment and like our temperature and our satiation level and like the ground and comfortability. But yeah, I would say start wherever you feel comfortable, and that's even setting up a tent inside your house. If you want to set up your tent in your living room first and sleep in there, do that, so you can put a fan on it so you can hear what it sounds like when it's flapping in the wind. Yeah, it's always just start where you feel comfortable. Like, that's my biggest advice for people. And then if you have questions, you can reach out to me. That's one of the reasons why I like not having viral videos sometimes, is because I try to respond to everybody, whether it's a comment or a DM. I'm sure if anybody has questions like this, they could reach out to you as well. And even if I don't know the answer, I can tap my community or use whatever resources I have I will also show you, hey, this is where I found this, so you will also know, because it's not very clear a lot of times. Like, just Googling stuff will get you wild answers, especially with AI now. You don't even know if you can trust it. You Google something that's like, wow, this seems really convincing, but I'm almost positive this is wrong. Like, but
That can't be right.
right? Yeah, they word it
Yeah.
so well. But yeah, I think that's the biggest advice I can give, is start where you're comfortable and stay there as long as you need to be comfortable. Don't move on just because you feel like you want to get there. Like I said, enjoy the journey, enjoy the experience of like being a new camper, because if you really love it, someday you won't be a new camper. And then the only time you'll go back to being a new camper, let's like me, is like when you are getting asked questions. And I really enjoy that, like getting back into that new camper state of mind, and really slowing things down and allowing yourself to be in the moment of enjoying it for a purpose too, is to help other people. That's always great.
I think one of the things that you've said that really resonates with me is the concept of keeping it simple, because I feel like at least when I was starting to figure out what I wanted to do with my solo camping adventures and setup and stuff, I turned to social media and I turned to what I saw online as the resource. And I saw all these people camping specifically and making these really elaborate meals. And
Oh
I was
yeah.
like, wow. And you go on
Oh man.
Pinterest or Google and you look up camping recipes, and everything requires like 1,000 different like ingredients. It requires, all this stuff. And it's usually a meal for like 10 people. And I'm just and I was so overwhelmed. I was like, what am I supposed to eat? I was so confused. And now, like 4 years later, 5 years later, doing this, more regularly, I'm like, I know now that I'm a peanut butter sandwich girl. Like,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
packing a peanut butter sandwich and I'm
Oh
making
yeah.
scrambled eggs in the morning. I'm like not doing anything fancy. I'm keeping it simple. But
Yeah.
as soon as I kind of like peeled back that piece of like, oh well, everybody online is like, or when I did my Subaru camper build, I did a no build thing because I kept seeing online everybody's building all these things and having these really intense setups on the inside. And I was like, do I have to do that?
Yeah,
I was
totally,
like,
no,
"Can I
yeah.
just put a sleeping bag in there and a little
Oh, yeah,
mattress and call it good?" And but I didn't it was really intimidating when I first was starting, kind of misleading too. I just was like,
totally.
"Wait, does it have to be this complicated? Obviously, everybody's doing it, so it needs to be." And kind of having other people like you who are like more approachable and have more realistic steps. But you also have like the really cool stuff that you share too that you've purchased or been gifted. Like, there's both sides of it. But yeah, I think just simplifying it, taking a
Yeah,
step back,
totally.
setting up
Mhm.
in your backyard or in your house, keeping it simple. It also helps people who have financial barriers. You
Yeah,
don't have
totally.
to have this
Yeah,
giant setup with all the best brands. Like,
yeah.
just go out with what you've got, invest in some cheapy basics, and go
Yeah,
from there.
totally, yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, ask people too. I feel like one of the biggest things in my Discord community is people asking about other gear, because and use resources for people that do camp a lot. Like, I always say, whenever somebody asks me about a piece of gear, I always follow it up with, like, for example, somebody asks me about a sleeping pad. I'll say, like, "Okay, are you a cold sleeper? Or are you a hot sleeper? Are you a side sleeper? Are you a back sleeper?" Like, 'cause so I've literally, and this is no joke, throughout the, years, like, this is not all at one time because it is really expensive. I've probably bought each type of gear that I have at least 3 times. Not each product, but each type of gear, because the first time, oh, it didn't work, or, like, it didn't last for my style of camping. So, but the gear that I do have, almost anything that you see in any of my videos, you can ask me about it, and I can give you a bunch of other stuff that is similar. But even in not that vein, I always want people to ask, like, "Hey, I'm looking for this." I can at least be like, "Okay, you wanna look for a product that has XYZ." Even if I don't have it, from what you're telling me, this is what you should try to get. And, it's such a subjective experience. Camping is such a subjective thing. Everybody has different tolerances of cold, heat, comfort. Some people like to have the huge spreads, like you're saying, of like, but no one ever shows you all the dishes right at the end. Like, when you have limited water and you're just first camping, like, it's very rare that you see like how to dispose of or like drain all the food and like properly dispose of dishes out there. But you see the great meal, it's beautiful and looks delicious, but you also don't see all the stuff, the giant bag of spices that you're carrying, or your partner's carrying because you just have like a
Yeah.
cute little backpack, either way that you go. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of different things that come to mind, and like I'm always happy to be a resource if anybody has a question about a piece of gear. Um, Shoot, I've even sent people gear. I'm like, hey, I'm not using this. You can try it. If not, give it to someone else. Like, also too, get gear on, like, the one thing about REI that I do like is that you can return it. That's my biggest
Hmm.
thing. It is a little pricey for the membership, as well as the just gear in general is pricey, but you can always return it. That's the thing too. But also, because I like to tell people, get in at whatever price point that makes sense to you. Um, I get a lot of stuff on, like, Facebook Marketplace. If you're comfortable using apps like that, definitely try that. And then worst case scenario, you don't like it, you could always try to resell it, even if you get a little bit of your money back. Um, but you'll start to see too, when I say you, just like I'm talking to like campers in general that are at the beginning, like, you'll start to build your setup, and when it becomes more like personalized and like subjective, like, you'll really start. That's what I think people will really start to like it, especially when you buy a piece of gear and you use it and it really comes through for you. You're like, dang, my lighter broke. I'm so glad I had that ferro rod. You're like, hell yeah. Then that's like your ferro rod. That'll never leave your setup. You could probably have 20 lighters, but that'll never leave your setup. For me, it's like that's the kind of relationship that I have with gear. Is like, it's also very personal. I love gifting gear too. Like, whenever people probably tell you, I love if someone's like, oh, I need this. Like, if I have it and I'm not using it, or I haven't used it in a while, like, that's also good for me to clean out my gear. Like, so I'm like, now I can get something new. But that's part of the community aspect too. Is, like, everybody needs to support each other. I'm surprised there's no app that's like a share economy app. I see it on Facebook Marketplace all the time. Like, hey, rent my camp setup for the weekend. Like, you can do that because a lot of people don't camp every single weekend, and that is taking up valuable real estate in your closet, just not doing anything. There's someone that could rent it out there too. I'm trying to get a gear rental program with like my local library. I've seen a couple cities that do that. That'd be super cool. Like, education, I was like, I will make all the content. I will get sponsors to get like a tent, this, and this, and I will make in-depth content for all that video. So before you rent it, maybe one of the stipulations is you have to watch all these videos, like the watch through time, because a lot of the concern is like, what if people don't bring it back? Or like, what if people X, Y, and Z? So we're kind of working to like figure out ways to get people invested through education so that the program will be successful. But yeah, at whatever price point you can get in, if you can rent it, borrow it, just the important thing is getting out there. And I guarantee you, there's only a couple things that if you're out there and you're having good experience, that you're like, dang it, I wish I would have that. And that's your sleeping system. That's the most important thing. Just be comfortable. That's the big thing that I would say that most people splurge on first as well, is a good sleeping system. Because if you don't sleep well, you're gonna be cranky. Me too. Like, trust me.
I was listening to one of your other podcasts, and the people who were the guests on it, I forget their names, were they were like, camping doesn't have to be uncomfortable. It can
Oh,
be
wow.
comfortable. You don't have
Oh,
to be miserable.
oh yeah. Shout
And I
out Yessie
think,
and Ado. That was a
yeah,
trip. I was probably wow. Their setup is immaculate. I felt like I
yeah.
was
If
at
you
a
want to see a
resort.
bougie
Yeah,
bougie
yeah,
setup, that was
yeah.
crazy.
It
Yeah, it
was
was really
such a
cool
great
though.
experience. I'm like, wow. And kind of same thing too. Like, we're circling back. Like, we showed up and they had everything set up, and you can just feel the love and the curation. Like, it was just amazing. But yeah, it doesn't have to be uncomfortable. That's also to say it doesn't have to be super expensive, because
Mhm.
Yessie and Ado, they're also very budget oriented too, and so they've given themselves the time to literally like set a note. Like, this is what I do if I'm looking for a sleeping bag. You can set up notifications on all the OfferUp, Facebook Marketplace, and I'll just set a notification for a sleeping bag or whatever details you want in there come up. And then once one pops up, it'll send you a notification. And then if it's the price point I want, I'll make an offer. But just take your time too. Like, I feel like we live in a world where everybody wants everything now, especially when they see our setups and they're so like curated and big and elaborate. But my setup wasn't always like that. I mean, sometimes I throw up some old school videos where like I just have like a giant like storage tub with all my shit in it, like, slide that thing out. But I mean, even that itself is a great thing too. Also tip, have a storage bin of camping stuff where you keep all your camping stuff. Make it easy, make the process of going camping easy as well. Because I think a lot of times it's like, if you have everything everywhere, it's a process in itself to like, all right, where's the stove? Where's my flashlight? Where's this? Where's that? Where's this? But if you can keep everything in one place, even if it is a giant tub, like I used to do, that makes the experience way easier when you're starting to go out there at the beginning.
Such good advice for people who are just getting started. And I think good reminders too for people who maybe are a little bit more experienced too, that just be like, oh yeah, okay, this is it doesn't have to be super expensive if I'm looking to upgrade my gear, I can find it secondhand or whatever it might be.
Totally.
I seriously, I could pick your brain forever, but I think one of the coolest things about talking to you and about what you're doing on your channel is just, yeah, you're a gearhead. You love talking about gear and all this stuff, and you are camping all the time, more than the majority of people, and yet you have made everything so approachable and so inclusive and so accessible for people who are at any stage in their journey, with whether they really don't identify with the term outdoorsy, have never camped in their life, or they are, super outdoorsy, camping all the time. Regardless, they can find something in your content to really identify with and learn from. And I think the through line and kind of everything that you've been sharing with us today is education is everything, and it's power. Knowledge is power. If you do all of the research on the correct gear to have, or on the place that you're going, and you feel prepared, you feel confident, then when you're actually in the situation itself, you're going to feel better, and you're going to feel more self-confident and empowered to really be outdoorsy. And that looks different for everybody, and that's okay. So
Totally.
um, I just think lots of great perspective from you, and I appreciate you so much for sharing all of this. Truly, I do think we should have a follow-up episode
Anytime, I'm
at some
available. Let me
point.
know.
Before we wrap things up, I really just want to thank you so much and give you the opportunity to just kind of plug whatever you've got going on, whatever you've got coming up. What's next for you?
Yeah, I have a couple fun partnerships coming up. I'm literally going camping tomorrow, like in the morning. Um, Yeah, and that's kind of like my vibe. It's like I don't have this is if you want a real clip of some crazy dude that just camps all the time with no plan really, that's it. I do have kind of like a little doc that we're working on, a little documentary that's been in the process for a long time with my buddy Tyler and his production company. Super kind of simple. It's going to be like a travel Bourdain show, but like camping, but also like going into cities. Like camping doesn't always have to be at the campsite. Like we go into town and like we have a local drink or like, eat food and then come back to the campsite. But so that will be coming out. I'm not sure the ETA on that, but that's really exciting. I'm going to the Snow Peak camp. They invited me out there in October, so I'll have content rolling out on that. And yeah, follow me. It's Campthropology across all platforms. Feel free to like reach out, DM, comment, add me. Like I said, I try to get back to everybody. I just realized there's a whole bunch of different filters you can do on DMs where I had like a whole bunch that were just in there on like, I don't know, but I'll find it eventually. If not, comment like, hey, I DM'd you, and I'll look for it. Especially if you have camp gear questions, gear questions, location questions, how to find places questions. And if not, I can definitely, I can probably send you a video that I've already made on it, or I can get you resources from the community or find them too, because it's not always easy to find outdoor content. Solid stuff too, for sure. But yes, say hi. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. And I'll have all of the links to all of Roland's stuff just in the show notes or in the description of the YouTube video. So if you guys want to click through and give him a follow and a shout and a DM, please do that.
Definitely.
But yeah, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. For everybody listening, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast. That really helps just spread the good word of Outdoorsy to more
Definitely.
people. And also, if you want to, you can become a patron through Patreon and gain access to the Outdoorsy Discord server. Roland, I haven't told you this yet, but you'll get access to that too, just as a little thank you
Ooh,
for joining.
cool.
So you can ask him gear questions in there. All these links will be available in the show notes. But thank you so much, Roland, for joining us, and
Thank you
everybody
for having
listening at
me.
home. Yeah, everybody listening at home, thank you for listening. And just remember that you belong out there.
Definitely. Bye, everyone.